Now, I'd like to show you in SQL account how do we do a GST set tax date. As you can see here, we already did a GST return from April to June, 3-month cycle, and we already submitted our GST03 to custom. Once you have done that, as you probably would know, whenever you try to backdate a transaction to June, because you already submitted April to June, and when you try to save it, the system will automatically block you from saving the transaction, because once the GST return is calculated, you are not supposed and submitted, you are not supposed to amend them unless you do a resubmission amendment. However, in the situation of claiming input tax, you actually have the right to claim your input tax up to 6 years later. Hence, to make it easy for you to claim rather than a complete resubmission is actually this little function called set tax date. So over here, a supplier invoice is provided for me backdated to June, so I have to follow the supplier date. However, I want to claim in July. Since June GST return has been submitted, I can right-click on any blank area of the purchase invoice, click on this set tax date, and forward my tax date to July, the next GST return submission cycle. And when I click on it, you will notice there is a special date to distinguish the document date as well as the tax date are actually different. Now I can save this document. The same logic will apply to the purchase invoice, purchase voucher as payment voucher as well. Over here you can see there is a late claim from salesman. The claim is actually in June, but the tax date will be set to July, and you can save this document. Also applicable in journal entry. Again, same logic. Document in June, tax date in July. How about sales invoice? All the other earlier 3 examples I've shown you is claim input tax. However, when it comes to output tax, which in this case is a sales invoice, you cannot forward the tax date using that date, because by law you are required to pay your tax from the invoice date on the same cycle most of the time. So for sales invoice, you are not allowed to forward your tax date to a future date. Now let's look at ledger. It's commonly asked when I look at my ledger report. For example, over here, earlier we have the payment voucher for stationery, late claim by salesman. The payment voucher was done in 2nd of June, and the tax date was set to July. But why is the transaction in June and the GST claimable still in not July but June? The reason is very simple. Since the tax itself originates from the transaction itself. This is the principal transaction. So the 100 ringgit and the 6 ringgit tax is considered one pair of transaction. We prefer not to display them in 2 separate transactions, otherwise it will be even more confusing. So they are one pair, we keep it as one pair. The principal as well as the child relation of this transaction is together on the same document date. To make it easy, if you go to Journal of Transaction Listing, you will be able to preview it. Again here, the same transaction, stationery purchase, late claim by salesman. It's still in June 2nd, but when you preview the report, you can load a special report called different post date versus tax date, and when you click on it, you will be able to clearly see the different date of the transaction post date, document date, as well as the tax date. This allows you to easily keep track of the transaction of different tax dates.